Hey guys and girls, Jimmy Houston here. What is an idiot bait? What is an idiot bait? And if you know what an idiot bait is, how do you fish it? And is there more than one way to fish it? Well, let's get right down to it. Let's get right down to it. It's hot out here. It's really, really hot out here. Probably be sweating here in a minute. An idiot bait is a term that I coined many, many years ago, maybe 35, 40, 45 years ago. And I would be doing seminars and I'd be talking about this particular bait. And I would ask people, would you like a bait called an idiot bait? And nobody would raise their hand. And then I would say, this is the reason I call it an idiot bait. It's so easy to catch fish on that any idiot can catch a fish on it. Everybody would raise their hand. Everybody would raise their hand. An idiot bait is nothing but a lipless crankbait. Now this lipless crankbait right here is by Lucky Strike. It's called an All-American Rattler. That's right, an All-American Rattler. That's about the most popular color right there, black and chrome, extremely good color. You'll notice that bait's got two fins on the top of it. It's designed to where if you let it drop and fall, it doesn't roll and tumble and tangle up in your line and your hooks. It falls straight. So if you let it fall, stop it, let it fall, stop it, or rip it. Or we'll show you a few techniques on how to fish that bait. But that's an All-American Rattler, Toby Keith's company, and it's an extremely good bait, and this is a great design in it. It's a very simple design, lipless crankbait. There's no lip on it. That's what this type bait is called. It's got rattles in it, makes a lot of noise. It's got a lot of vibration, makes a lot of noise, and you can fish it in a lot of different ways. We're going to show you several different ways to fish it. It comes in a lot of different colors. I've got several of them right here. I'll just pick them up, run through them real quickly with you. I don't know if I've got all the colors here, but I got several of the colors. This particular color right here, of course, is a baby bass. Pretty easy to see that right there. It just looks like a baby bass. Great color, great color. And over here I've got what they call a chili bowl. That's they call a chili bowl color because it's the kind of the color of chili. It's fluorescent orange and fluorescent red. So one of the reasons you call it an idiot bait, any idiot can catch fish on it, because it doesn't really matter how you fish it. It doesn't really matter how you fish. You can catch fish doing anything. Most of the time, you simply throw that bait out there, put your rod tip down close to the water, and wind it back in, just like I'm doing right here. Just wind it back in. Put that camera down just a little bit there. Wind it back in. That's all I'm doing. Throwing it out there, wind it back in. Now, it dropped and fell a little bit while I turned and adjusted the camera. And that bait will fall at a rate of about 1 foot per second. So if you're wanting to fish it 5 foot deep, if you just throw it out there and wind in, it's going to run about 3 or 4 foot deep. You want to get down 5 foot deep, just give it another couple seconds and it'll get down there 5 foot deep. Just throw it out there and wind it in. This is the way that most people fish a lipless crankbait, and it's absolutely a dynamite way to catch fish. No doubt about it, no doubt about it. But I want to show you a few other techniques that I use, because this bait is so versatile. You can use it so many different ways, and sometimes only one of these techniques will work. Sometimes if you use the other techniques, you don't get a bite. I've actually been out here, right here on this lake right here, and thrown this bait and not get a bite, and then start using a different technique on it and get a bite. And while I'm at it, I'll just tell you the technique I was using. I was throwing a bait out there and winding it in. I fished about an hour, moving all around. I was in the boat, wasn't standing here on the dock, but I was in the boat, moving around about an hour, chunking and winding, chunking and winding, chunking and winding, throwing a lot of different directions around the boat, throwing from the boat, side the boat, left the boat, right of the boat, and moving all the time, covering a lot of water, moving kind of from shallow water to deep water, back to shallow water, trying to figure out where the fish was. And this is all I was doing, throwing out there and winding it back in. Now that will catch you fish the majority of the time with this particular bait, this All-American Rattler. And like I said, it's got a lot of rattles in it. It's making a lot of noise. When you pull it in there, it looks like a shad. The noise attracts the fish. They look over and see that thing running through the water and run out there and bite it. But now here's what I changed to, and this is about the third or fourth technique I tried that day, but here's what I changed to. I'm throwing that bait out there, I'm letting her fall, I was holding my rod tip and letting it fall on tight line. So I got my line kind of tight, I'm letting it fall, so I've got control of that bait. I was letting it drop down and simply picking the bait up like that and letting it drop again. Now that bait will not tumble, it will not go down and get tangled in your hooks very often. It's designed to fall straight, so you keep a little contact in it. One reason you want to keep contact with that line and let it fall is you get a lot of bites on the fall. But I'm just pulling it up like that. And now I'm not making a real hard rip on it or anything, just kind of pulling it up like that, bringing that bait up and letting it fall, bringing it up and letting it fall. And I started that technique right there. And I would only do that probably, you know, maybe 4 or 5 ups and downs. And rip it up and let it fall 4 or 5 times. And once I did that 4 or 5 times, I'd go ahead and wind it in. And I'd find a lot of times, if I let that bait fall, let it fall, let it fall, pick it up, drop it, let it fall, let it fall, let it fall, pick it back up, drop it. I'd find a lot of times after I'd done that about 4 or 5 times, I'd get a bite a lot of times the first or second drop. But after I'd done it 4 or 5 times, let it drop, let it drop, let it drop. I do that 4 or 5 times. I'd just go ahead and wind it in. Now I'd make sure I had it down there relatively deep, but I'd just go ahead and wind it in like I'm doing right here. And that was a great technique. Now that technique is very close to a technique they call ripping a jig. Down in Tennessee they developed this. Tennessee, you're throwing out there, I'm gonna throw out there in deeper water. I'm gonna hold that bait up and let her fall all the way to the bottom. Now this is called ripping a jig, but now we're ripping an idiot bait, a Lucky Strike All-American Rattler. We're gonna let it go all the way to the bottom. And now the ripping technique is just a matter of letting it go all the way down to the bottom. They do this with a jig down there. Rip it up just like that. You see how fast I pick that thing up? I mean, really picked it up. Now if I let it fall down again, rip it up just like that. Let it fall. Now I like to keep contact with it a little bit as it falls. So if I get a bite on that fall, same thing with a jig, rip it up like that. Again, 4 or 5 times is about all you need to do it. About 4 or 5 rips, let her fall back down to the bottom again. Rip it up. See how fast I'm moving that right there? That's another technique. It's really, 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 really good. I'm gonna come over here and throw over toward the bank just a little bit. Maybe a little bit shallower water. We're throwing out there in about 15 foot of water right now. All right, in the shallow water, I'm gonna throw that thing out there. I'm gonna show you a couple other things. Now this is a sweeping technique where you wind and sweep your rod like this. See what I'm doing right there? I'm letting it drop. I'm going back, I'm kind of keeping contact with it, letting it fall, and I'm just sweeping my rod like this. That's another great technique. It's very similar to the other, but instead of your bait going up and falling back down, it's just going sideways and stopping and dropping. Sideways, stopping, and dropping. Like I got right there. That's what I'm doing. That's a great technique. That works really, really good as well. Jimmy, they're working so good you hadn't had a bite. That's right, I hadn't had a bite. We're out here in the middle of the day. It's really, really hot. Wind's blowing a little bit. We had a little cloud cover earlier this morning. They're out there, let her drop a little bit. Let her drop, 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 drop. Sweep it. Just sweep the rod to the side. You don't have to make real violent sweeps. In fact, what I would do, I would change the sweeps around a little bit. Sometimes you're sweeping just a little bit. Sometimes you're sweeping your rod a lot. But just sweep that rod back. Let her fall. Might want to make a really hard sweep in it, just like ripping that bait off the bottom. You're making real loud noise when you do that. A lot of rattles, just sweeping that bait back. That's another great technique for fishing this bait. Outstanding technique. Once you get 4 or 5 sweeps or 4 or 5 rips in there, whichever you're doing, then the other thing to do is simply throw that thing out there, wind it in at a wide variety of speeds. Fishing slow, you might want to slow that thing down or run it very rapidly. Now that's sort of an oxymoron when you say that. Fishing slow, we want to fish the bait slow. Yeah, sometimes you do that. Sometimes you want to do that. But when the fishing is slow and wind that bait slow, and I'm still ripping it there because I like to do that. Ripping it and sliding it sideways makes a big difference. You might want to wind that bait slow. So you throw that thing out there, throw that baby out there, wind it slow. Best bait right now, by the way, is this hot water is still a worm. And I thought I might get a bait. This is right here in the middle of the day too. It's really, really hot. We got a little breeze, so it's not that bad, but it's still warm. But just wind that bait and hit a little grass right there. Now there's the other thing there. When you hit grass like that, like I did right there, I hit some grass. What you want to do, hit the grass, make a hard jerk like that, and it explodes that bait out of that grass. And when it explodes, the grass is going to cause some little silt and dirt and stuff to be in the water, kind of make a little explosion type technique. And many times when you do that explosion technique, many times that's when you'll catch a fish. And so if you've got that thing and you're fishing it around grass and you feel it hit that grass, jerk it real hard like that right there and explode that grass off of it. So now your bait's clean again generally. Depends on the type of grass you're in. But your bait's clean again, and when you make that explosion, it gets the fish's attention, and he looks over there and there's that bait. There's that shad or that brim or that crawfish or whatever he thought that might be that was in that grass, popped out of that grass. He runs over and gets him a mouthful of it, and you've caught another fish. You've caught another fish. The last technique I want to show you real quickly, and we'll run through these real quick. We don't want to make a real long video of this, but make something really easy, but something that'll catch you fish the next time you go fishing with the world's luckiest lures. A Lucky Strike All-American Rattler. Is to burn it, throw it out there, wind it. Might want to stop every now and then. Let it fall, let it fall, let it fall. Wind it. This is moving it really fast. Now sometimes you just have to use a lot of different speeds. I like to use a lot of different speeds anytime I'm fishing a crankbait, whether it's a regular crankbait or a lipless crankbait. I like to use a lot of speeds, a lot of different speeds, figuring out what speed the fish might be biting. And right now they're not biting anything. Yo, I had one followed up right there. It's a small one, about a pound. But I did have one followed up. But so you let that bait fall down there a little bit. The main thing is you don't want to be doing the same thing all the time unless you figure out exactly how they want that bait. If you figure out how they want it, then you want to duplicate that, replicate that exact same technique again. Whether it's sliding the bait to the side, whether it's dropping and ripping it up or pulling it up and letting it fall, or just simply throwing it out there and winding it in. And you got to be careful when you're fishing this kind of bait though, because once you figure out what you're doing and you start catching fish on it, you have a tendency, and we all do, to just throw it out there and wind it in. Oh, I forgot, I was catching them sweeping that bait. Just throw it out there and wind it in. Now that will catch fish throwing it out there and wind it in. But I'm telling you, if you put the different actions on this bait like I'm doing right here, it'll help you a whole lot. Actually, to be honest with you, I'm totally amazed I hadn't caught a fish. I'm totally amazed I hadn't caught a fish. I stand in amazement at not catching a fish on the All-American Rattler out there. But it is right in the middle of the day. I come down here just to show you that bait and give you some ideas about how to fish it. Sometimes just fishing, stopping, letting it drop straight down. Sometimes that works pretty good. Right now, nothing works pretty good. I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. Probably ought to change colors when this happens, but I'm just gonna walk over here to the other side of the dock and make a few casts out on this side because I can't stand it that I hadn't had a bite. I just can't stand it that I hadn't had a bite. So I'm gonna walk over here. Benelli, don't you knock that tripod and camera in. And everything is just really messed up. Discombobulated. Try to get things a little bit even. Make a few more throws out there and try a few of these techniques over on this side. Sweeping that bait. Sweeping the bait is one of the easiest and simplest techniques. And if you're getting in the habit of doing this right here, and you know, let me tell you, this works in a lot of different baits. Not just a lipless crankbait. It works in a regular crankbait. It works in a lot of different baits that you're throwing. My buddy Calvin Hudson told me one time, he said he was a coach, a high school coach, you know, and he also coached a fishing team. And he said, one boy asked him one time, he said, when do you just throw it out there and wind it back in when you're fishing a bait? I got a bite right there. I got a bite, I got a bite. Didn't catch him, but I got a bite. When do you just throw a bait out there and wind it back in? When do you just throw it out and wind it back in? And he was talking about general, not necessarily a lipless crankbait. But he said, I never just throw it out there and wind it back in. And it doesn't matter whether he's working a topwater, a jig, a plastic worm, or whatever. He just never throws it out there and winds it back in. But I can tell you, throwing it out there and winding it back in is going to catch you a lot of fish. There's no doubt about that. But the more you do with that bait, the more erratic situations you put on that bait, no matter what bait you're fishing, that's hitting some water. I mean, not some water. That's hitting the water for sure. But it's hitting some grass out there when I throw up there real shallow. Let that thing fall a little bit and hitting that grass, and so I have to explode that bait out of that grass. Just think about that when you hit grass, to explode that bait out of that grass. Absolutely nothing biting out here today. All right, guys and girls. That's it, an idiot bait. Any idiot can catch a fish on this bait, except this afternoon you can't catch a fish on this bait. But I bet if I was to come out here later this evening, when the sun got a little bit lower and things got really, really light, I bet I'd catch a fish or two on it. So, Lucky Strike, the world's luckiest tackle. Y'all just remember, fish lucky, and I surely love you.